Hey there, thanks for dropping by. Today we're going to be painting the marsh scene that you saw at the beginning. There's a picture I took uh, from St. John's Bluff, just in Jacksonville, Florida. We're starting with trying to capture the line and sort of the gesture of the marsh, the light, those canals, the trees in the background. The picture when I took it was early morning, um, not too early, but in the morning. And but I didn't want it quite that same time of day. So you'll see as we go through this, I sort of shifted it more toward a early dawn type of light and feel. Right now we started using a synthetic brush, and it just wasn't covering. It's really good for getting gesture in, getting the line in. Not as good for coverage, so I switched over to a bristle brush, natural bristle brush, hog bristle. Um, that's much better coverage, holds paint. It's a lot nicer for doing this sort of this massing of shape. Um, I've got my tree line in the background, as you can see, and then we're kind of putting in the other shapes here. Um, Trying to be careful a little bit about where I want the canals, those channels to be, um, where the marsh is. Actually, you'll see here in just a second, I painted right over where I want the water to be. Not too bad though. You can just wipe that out. So not too bad. Most of this sort of early underpainting is done with burnt sienna and a little bit of burnt umber for the darker color. And some green gold is the gold there, the green color there. This is I like this stage for it's kind of my drawing stage. It's kind of uh, trying to understand if I've got the perspective right, if I've got the overall shapes right. If I don't get that part right to start with, kind of the rest of the painting gets thrown off. You can see I started to move into the sky there. I had way too much of that uh, earth color still on the brush. Um, I'm starting back over. I think I'm just kind of really just a gray, like a neutral gray color. At this point, we're just trying to sort of cover the canvas, cover the white. Everything's adjustable. This is all acrylic. Um, it's all adjustable. Trying to pay attention to where some of this water is, the movement is, and the light is. Um, as you see as I go through this, I, I started with a very light sky and didn't like it toward the end, so I ended up changing the weather, changing the sky, and changing the time of day toward the end on that. So um, you can see I'm kind of starting to bounce around a little bit, trying to not get caught into one painting any one piece. Um, trying not to be fussy. You can tell it's not fussy. Um, try not to get caught up in any one area, right? We're painting a whole scene. We're painting, you know, the whole painting, not a piece. And so to me, it's important to move around the canvas. You can see, even painting the sky, start on the left, move to the right, kind of converge in the center. Uh, Trying to put in similar tones in the water, what will become the water that I'm using in the sky. The water will reflect the sky. Should have the same general tone. Should be a little darker than the sky generally. If the sky is light, water should be a little darker. Water is always kind of interesting. It takes everything toward the middle. Um, if something's really bright, when it's reflected in water, it'll be darker. If something's really dark, it'll actually reflect a little lighter. It kind of moves all the values toward the middle. Going through now, putting some more masking in. I feel pretty good about my drawing at this point. So I'm starting to put some heavier paint down. Kind of really at this point thinking about the darks, the shadow colors, the undertone. Um, I'm going to paint over all this with lighter colors, things like that. Um, it's also a great place to be free with your edges. You know, try to get organic shapes. Um, when we paint or draw, we tend to try to make things really orderly, or at least I do. Uh, and so you kind of have to fight some of that a little bit, that natural tendency to try to order everything, make picket fences out of everything. So you can see again, I'm kind of bouncing around the canvas. Don't want to stay in any one area too much. And I'm kind of on my palette, I'm kind of mixing, going back and forth between the green gold and the burnt sienna, and it's sort of a mixture between those two. Um, Starting to lay some more of the greens in now, cooling some of the temperature down on the paint a little bit. Start to move some of it into that distant tree line. I promise, it's supposed to be a tree line. Um, may not look much like one. So I think I'll let all that dry. We're starting to go over now. I broke out this synthetic brush. I really like these. They're like palette knives, but they're like silicone, kind of like a baking utensil would be sometimes. But I really like them. You can put texture, but you can't get super detailed, which is nice. Kind of helps keep me from trying to get too detailed when I'm not at the detail stage. If I try to go detailed now, I'd probably have to paint over it anyway. So we're just putting some tone on the sky there. Trying to key the light in, moving back into the ground with the burnt sienna and green gold. Um, I think I may have even dipped into some phthalo green right there because that is really green. And again, at this stage, I don't mind, um, being experimental with the colors. Like that green looks a little unnatural, but it's okay. I'll probably paint over it before it's all said and done. Wanted to key the water back in again, um, to the kind of to the sky. Make sure I kept that. You'll notice I use a lot of horizontal strokes in that mid to far ground there. It kind of helps to add to add distance, depth. Depth is the word I was looking for. Kind of helps to add depth uh, into your paintings. You can also uh, modulate your color temperatures. Things are typically warmer the closer they are to you, and cooler the further away. Warmer meaning, your oranges, your yellows, your reds. Coolers meaning your greens, your blues, your purples. Think of John Carlson's book on landscapes, where he talked about that the phenomenon there is that the yellow wavelength drops out um, faster than anything else. First yellow, then red, and finally blue. And So anything that you're seeing in the distance, the far distance, if you see like a mountains, that's why they seem to be bluer. There's also atmosphere comes into play as well. Uh, so kind of looking, trying to make sure I'm happy with what's going on with the little waterways here. Probably what attracted me most to this painting was the waterways. Uh, I like sort of the layers of them as they went into the distance. So we're coming down, we're uh, mixing paint on here. You can see kind of warming things up, redder, using a lot more of that burnt sienna. Um, might have dipped into a little bit of quinacridone red, but it's probably mostly burnt sienna. I think that green is making it look really, really red. I tend to mix my paint as I go. I don't mind it mixing on the canvas as well. Um, I see painters who will make big piles of paint and then paint from there. It's just not looks great. It's just not the way that works really well for me. Um, I think a lot of times when I'm painting, I'm reacting a little bit as well, right? Put something down. Do I like that? Um, I forget who said that. Someone said, if it looks good, it's right. And so, a lot of times it's putting something down. Do I like that? If I do, it's right. If I don't, it's wrong. Um, here I'm kind of softening that. I didn't like that sharp angle there. That's one of the nice things about acrylics. It doesn't take too long. You just paint right over them. So I kind of wanted to round that out a little bit. This video is playing at about 4x speed. I think it took me about 3 hours altogether to do this painting. Um, so we're probably close to an hour into the painting at this point, or getting close to it. It's time to start putting the back tree line in. The fact that it was much lighter than the ground plane uh, was, definitely making it look off. Um, those, again, back to Carlson's book on Guide to Landscape Painting. Great book. Yeah, I suggest great for anybody to read if you haven't. Uh, uh, the verticals like trees um, should really be probably the darkest shapes on your painting. Sky plane should be the lightest. Ground should be the second lightest. Vertical shapes like trees should be the darkest. We don't have a lot of hills in Florida, but if we did, they would be in between the ground plane and the tree plane. At this point, kind of just having fun, putting some different colors in, putting some different shapes in. Um, Not super worried, as you can tell, about, um, you know, oh, this tree should look like this, or this leaf should look like that, or um, it's not really what I'm going for there. Kind of reinforcing the darks next to the water, right? So the light's coming from the sky, uh, and it would make, that shadow would be darkest right next to the water. Um, uh, I think at this point it's dried again. Um, Now I'm putting some more color back into the waterways. Felt like I was kind of losing some of those shapes a little bit. So I wanted to put some of those back in and connect them. I wanted a little bit more um, float connectivity, maybe. Um, like I think it looks better now because the waterway kind of goes from the bottom right to the mid right, and then you can kind of flow from, I'm sorry, bottom right to mid left. Then you can kind of flow from mid left back to most of the way to the right, and then back to the left. It kind of creates some angles and movement. Trying to put some atmosphere, as I mentioned earlier, back into these clouds and or not clouds, trees and uh, this field, um, making them bluer than they would have been or are in real life, but kind of pushes them back, right? It makes them look further in the distance. These waterways, I really like that blue color that I ended up with there. And so I applied it everywhere. You'll see later in the video, though, I did start changing it. I got to the point where I didn't like it as much. It felt too monotone, and uh, but that's okay. It's kind of part of the process for me. Is when I put it down, I liked it. And a little later, I didn't like it as much. So you can change it. That's one of the nice things. Again, reinforcing some of those darks right next to the water. This is also kind of part of my um, edge control. Um, I do a fair amount of like pushing and pulling. So at least that's the way I think of it. Add some color, take some color away, um, smooth it out, keep some texture. Um, I had that one tree on the far right that had that like yellowish peachy color, and I really liked it better than these really blue trees. So kind of trying to put some more of that back into the trees. A lot of that's by feel. Um, I like to gradate those things, meaning I don't want them to all be the same color all the way across, right? It's a little peachier on the far right, much more green on the far left, and they kind of come together in the middle. So still kind of working with some grays, um, mixing some of the colors together. I tend to work in sort of areas, right? Skies, trees, that sort of mid to far ground, and then the foreground. Um, Here's where I started feeling like I didn't have a good sense of, you know, like a primary light source. Like where's the light? Whoops, a little extra sienna there. I didn't have a good sense of like the light is coming from here, right? I didn't want it felt too uniform across the sky, and I wanted it to there to be a little bit more of a focal point of where the light's coming from, more so than some of the other areas. So I started putting some different colors into the sky. Um, Peaches, uh, mint. That's almost a mint color to the left there. Some light, very very light purples, light blues. What I do here, and sometimes if you see my me not painting for a moment. Uh, I'm probably mixing some different colors together. And I try to mix a couple of different hues that are about the same value, meaning they're all about the same, pretty close anyway. Um, Same level of light to darkness. That's what values are meaning. But they've got different temperature, meaning I might have a little bluer one, a little pile that's a little bluer, one that pile that's a little pinker, one that's a little yellower, one that's a little more purple, and then uh, really in the skies, I really like to uh, kind of go back and forth between those different temperatures, um, and it makes a um, really natural looking sky to me. Um, may not look very natural at the moment, but but it eventually gets there. So now you can see I'm kind of keying more blue in, more blue in the sky. Um, don't get too attached to it. It won't stay there for too terribly long. I ended up not liking it that much. So you can see I put some peach in there. Kind of liked it. Kind of like the peach color. It kind of looked like a little cloud. So I started adding some more of that in. This whole part of the painting should be called like changing the weather or something because it's adding clouds and uh, going from uh, mid morning to early morning to uh, but that's one of the lovely things we can do as painters. We can we can change we can change things around. I was really trying to get the light to show up right there where I'm working right now, right, with that weird yellow color. Um, Kind of wanted that to be the brightest area in the sky. And so what you're seeing me struggle with is trying to get the right tone uh, into that area. Mm. We're mixing paint. We're mixing paint. Um, I've struggled a bit with this, but to be honest with you, I struggles meaning it took me it didn't come right out the box, right? It took me several little back and forth pushes and pulls, but honestly, it's one of the funnest parts of painting to me. So I can kind of get lost in this little parts of them sometimes. And sometimes you do it, and you go, well, it looked great there, but of course you keep going. Um, I think at this point I was getting pretty close to what I like, so I wanted to leave the sky alone for a little bit and come start trying to put some of those same colors into the water. Um, wasn't super worried about uh, you know a journalistic interpretation of uh, reflections of in water. Um, Obviously, I think you guys can tell that. More interested in what a marsh I think feels like, and adding a bit more chroma and the intensity of the color, uh, mixing the shades a little bit here and there. So I'd say at this point we haven't done any detail work. Um, Sometimes I start my detail work too soon, and I usually regret it because inevitably, if I didn't get the shapes or the forms right, I end up going over the detail work and then have to put the detail work back in. And you'll probably see me do a little bit of that, but I really tried to hold off this time and kind of really get done with what I felt like was the shapes, the forms, the the color, the hue, um, before I dove into trying to do too much detail work. Okay, I have a little light right up at the top of my painting, and yep, that one. It kind of blows out the top of the painting, especially in the video. It's not too bad um, when I'm sitting there painting, but I wanted to move it a little bit so I could see the water and the sky a little more, a little more natural light there. Okay, we let all that dry, and we're now starting the next phase here. So I've actually broken out a brush now. This is one of those cheap hardware store style brushes. I absolutely love these brushes for uh, natural organic shapes. Um, they're great at marshes and you know plant life, that sort of thing. They're also great at blending. I was really surprised at how good they were at blending brushes. I think this brush might have cost 25 cents. Um, I think when you're looking for these brushes, the cheaper the better. Uh, Now be worried, be forewarned. They uh, they'll throw hairs and lose hairs quite a bit. Um, so you got to be mindful of that for a while. Um, but they're awesome at um, blending and creating these organic shapes, and especially like grasses and marshes and reeds and those sorts of things. They paint it way better than I could if I had a tiny little brush trying to, paint every leaf, every blade. You can see, I spent a fair amount of time with this brush in the foreground um, because it's closer to us, a lot more detail. But when you go back, you're going to lose that detail. You just can't see that far. So I don't do too much with it as we go back. Um, Next, I moved into, I broke out my sword brush. I think I forget what it is. Creative Mark or something, sword brush. Um, it's a good little sword brush. I think it was like $5 or $6 or maybe eight. Not very expensive, but it's also really good at kind of making these organic shapes, especially if you let the brush kind of dance a little bit. Um, when I do that, it works pretty well. You have to watch out that you don't, you know, start painting picket fences all of a sudden. So you can see that's where I'm trying to bounce around the painting, right? Left, middle, right, left, you know. Um, I want to connect some of these shapes. That's some of what you're seeing. Um, so you'll see that too. I'll draw some lines that go up sort of through the water. Uh, I'm not sure there was much paint on that brush, but it made me feel good about it. Um, just was putting a bunch of horizontal lines in there. Some of them come through, some don't. Uh, Again, trying to give an illusion of depth. When I'm doing this, I'm kind of again back to like we were talking earlier. I I'm mixing. I've got, a pile of green and a pile of red, or burnt sienna. Here we go. Now we're connecting some of those shapes. Um, the some burnt umber and green gold, and just kind of going back and forth between them. I don't want to use any one color, or hue too much. Um, all right, one more time into the clouds, into the sky. This is using another one of those little cheap brushes. Um, Great for clouds and blending. Wouldn't have thought so, but they're really great for that. Um, yeah, again, this is, I could probably title this part of this part of the video, let's change the weather. Um, because right now it looks like maybe a mid-morning-ish scene or something, right? Um, Gonna probably try to change that a little bit. I think it felt too bright. Uh, that blue was a little too blue. I know I'm putting more of it on, but uh, you'll see in just a moment. In my head, I'm really thinking about that spot, kind of mid to right, and I know that's where I want, the most light to be coming from. And you can only y your light is only as bright as the darks around it. Um, you know, if everything's bright, nothing is. Um, so what I'm what you'll see me trying to do is somewhat just through color temperature, right? Purples and blues instead of yellows and pinks and oranges. But I'm trying to uh, draw uh, create sort of the illusion that the light is coming more from that area than the whole sky. Um, I think at this point I kind of liked the purplish color. Um, that I think it was setting this yellowy orangey color. Uh, it was it was resonating against it well. Um, so and again, right, we got to have darks or contrast to make brights. And so at this point, I think I wanted to take the whole sky, other than that area, into a little more purpley, a little more um, uh, less bright part of the sky. So again, this probably took longer than I thought it would, um, but it's a really iterative process. It's put it down. Do you like it? Change it. Is it better now than it was? Um, I do think it's sort of heading in the right direction now, right? Um, I didn't feel like the sky and the ground matched up that well before, but I think they're now heading in the right direction. As I said, don't get too attached to that blue. So I really like the way that purple's a real muted grayish purple, but kind of makes that yellow area pop. Kind of brings your attention there, which is the area that I wanted to have the attention. So because I've changed the sky so much, putting in those cool purples and blues. I just wanted to go back into the water again and sort of update it to uh, kind of match some of that a little bit. Um, Sometimes people ask, where's your focal point? Um, I, I think I like the idea of areas of interest more than a focal point. I like you could look at that little spot in the sky where you were talking about in the trees there. You could follow that down. Um, you could look at the foreground, um, some of those reeds. You could look at that middle distance where some of those canals are going back and forth and they're kind of coming in and to and out of the picture. So I like that idea, I think, better. Um, this is a little bit of a negative shape painting. I'm painting that bluey, watery color back into the reeds. It's a nice way to sort of have that push and pull that I was talking about earlier. Getting close to the end of this one. Really just putting in some final details, a few spots here and there. Trying to remind myself not to overwork it. Well, I hope you've enjoyed uh, this painting and my explanation of what I was doing and my thought processes behind it as I was doing it. Um, if you do, feel free to like and subscribe, uh, and hope to see you again sometime. Thanks for watching.